Hey everybody, this is Dan from Pain Free You. Today I introduce Bethany from Cornwall, UK, and she's been gracious enough to share her story with my audience and all you folks out there. So hopefully you can feel inspired and maybe get some education out of this as to what worked for her and pick up some tips. And it's always great to hear somebody else's success in getting through whatever mind body symptoms they've had. So Bethany, I really appreciate you doing this. So why don't you introduce yourself and take us on a little journey?
Hey, so hi Dan, it's wonderful to see you again. I was in your coaching program. I think it was about a year ago that I left. I was in there for 18 months, and this is our first catch up. So you didn't know
I
until
don't
now
I
that
don't
I'd
know how
completely
you're doing.
recovered. So, and how I'm doing now, I'll start it on a positive is that I am completely recovered from chronic pain and symptoms. Completely. I'm back to being a normal functioning human.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah, so this is a great place to be. And my journey with chronic pain and symptoms started about 7 years ago. So it's been a 7 year round trip
Sure.
to get out of it.
Right.
Um, and having learned and looked back, I understand now that from when I was the tiniest baby, I actually had mind body symptoms.
Right.
So from when I was born, I had lots of problems with digestion, being sick. I was bottle fed, and that didn't agree with me. And I was diagnosed with an allergy to milk, so I was put on alternatives, soy milk, also had skin issues, eczema. So my understanding now is that my nervous system from the moment I was born was already very hypersensitive.
Right. Okay.
So I wasn't feeling safe or regulated or balanced. And those symptoms continued through childhood. When I was about 8 years old, I started getting migraines, and I wasn't taken to the doctor for that. I was given aspirin or paracetamol,
Hmm.
and that continued um, right up through this whole time. Um, and when I was 14, I had a diagnosis of depression from the doctor. By the time I was 17, I had another diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. Um, so I had quite a difficult time as a teenager and was suffering from these migraines quite intensely.
Well,
I'd have
that
two or
would
three a month.
that would make anybody anxious and depressed.
Yeah.
So now they're going to slap a label on you that says you have depression and general anxiety disorder,
Yep.
when in fact it was likely the cause or caused by the how horrible you were feeling.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I had a difficult time. I didn't get on at school very well. And again, having learned as an adult, I would say that we now call people like me highly sensitive people.
Hmm.
So on the spectrum of being a little bit Asperger's and just a very highly sensitive nervous system and quite finding it quite difficult in social situations. And I didn't understand any of that then. I was also dyslexic, but that again, nobody picked that up when I was at school. So it was, a rough time. And you can see now how that sort of set me up to get into the chronic symptoms because I was already experienced because anxiety and depression, as we know, are the same as back pain or the migraine or whatever. It's all the same.
Right.
Um, so I had no way or help of dealing with those things. I also developed or was diagnosed with PMS and PMT, so the menstrual problems, symptoms. So I was having a bad time with that. Um, my daughter was born when I was just 19 years old, so I was a
Right. A young mom.
young mum, young teenage mum. And after she was born, I had a postpartum hemorrhage, which is an infection. And I wasn't scared at the time, but I think my subconscious probably was. And I was given very, very strong antibiotics. After that, I then developed quite severe digestive problems, which I then had a diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And I put that down to these really strong antibiotics. I thought that's what, had happened.
Sure.
I understand now. I mean, they wouldn't have been great for me, but I understand now. It's, again, having a child, often that's a time where TMS does ramp up.
Yeah. Lots of
Quickly
responsibility.
respond. Yeah, it's all the responsibility, all the internalized rage, all very big emotions, all those things that I hadn't learned. I didn't understand how to regulate my emotions at all at that time, as many of us haven't. So emotions to me were a panic attack. It was complete overwhelm and a panic attack. And I'd cry, and I actually thought that was feeling emotions, but it wasn't. Um, so I had then these symptoms, and then when I was 21, I had a kidney infection, which was quite serious. Again, I needed antibiotics. I nearly was taken into hospital, but I actually wasn't. After that, I then started getting UTIs, recurrent ones, had to keep having antibiotics, got stuck in this cycle. But I actually put myself back in university. So I did a foundation degree in complementary health therapies.
Okay.
So I was quite into alternatives, and I learned lots of different things that would help that. I understood it was a kind of a fear-based stress thing. So I think that not understanding the whole mind body thing at that time, but looking back, I can see why,
Leading you into it. Yeah.
yeah, why some things helped. I could manage that. I'm quite into herbs and, taking cranberry juice and all these things. But so I managed those symptoms without antibiotics, but I still would get them. So that went on for years. So I'd have the migraines, I'd have the UTIs, I'd have the PMS and PMT, and a few skin issues. That wasn't so bad, but I would get some flare-ups of eczema sometimes in my hands if I was stressed. A little bit of chemical sensitivity, where I'd feel a tight chest sometimes with, air fresheners and perfumes. I didn't go to the doctor or take any medication for any of that. So all those symptoms I didn't go to the doctor about, just managed it myself. But I was functioning completely normally, and the panic attacks started to become very internalized because I was very aware that I didn't want my daughter Jasmine to see me upset. So if that happened, I was like I found a way to get it all. So there was no hyperventilating. Nobody would know there was anything going wrong. It was just so I can't really explain it, but it was like imploding.
Wow.
So because I didn't want her to learn them or to be worried about me, we did have a difficult time with her father, who many years in court, but he wasn't allowed any contact with her. So I won't go into all the traumas, but
It's okay.
yeah. So I went through a lot of trauma. Let's just put it that way. So mental health, and it was it was difficult, and I had no help
Wow.
to deal with any of that. And I didn't understand that I needed to. I think that's the thing. It was kind of like turned into, you can say survivor, but I turned into a fighter. I was like, I have to be everything for Jasmine. Didn't have family support. And so it was just like, I wasn't allowed to have any feelings really. That's kind of how I felt. I've got to be okay for her.
Mhm.
And I was able to get horses, so we had our own horses, and I learned natural horsemanship, Pirelli natural horsemanship, which that was actually a kind of a way of coping, and I didn't really realize that's what was going on, but because I just knew that I wanted to learn that, but it was definitely, and because lots of people do horse therapy and horse facilitation, and so I was drawn to that. And for Jasmine, that helped her understand all sorts of things about people, life, relationships. So we both developed really close relationships with our horses. We spent a lot of time
It's awesome.
learning, like going up country, doing all kinds of clinics and things. And again, I think that was just a real gift that helped take us through that part of life. And again, for me, understanding the mind body stuff now, I think that was like a soothe factor. So that helped me to be okay. So that helped me to be okay for her. So my horse, everything I learned from him, I was kind of learning parenting and how to help her get through her teenage years by how I was learning to be with my horse. But
But
again, it was
the
kind of,
horse was also providing you a certain amount of calm and
yeah,
the
yeah,
the the interplay of personalities between you and the horse, and um, you learned that, well, if I want the horse to be calm, I've got to be calm,
yeah,
and how to just feed off of each other's energy as opposed to the horse feeding off of
yeah,
anxious energy.
exactly, exactly. So
That's
you've got to
beautiful.
be the horse's leader, and
Love that.
but not in a bossy way. It's like it's described in a way. It's like 51-49 balance. So you're not like they're saying, I'm going to make you do stuff. It's about how you
Right.
can help them feel confident, trust you, want to do things. So it is wonderful. And that helped, like I said, take us through. And that's actually helped me recover because that part of my recovery now is actually looking back at what I learned there and going, oh, okay, that makes even more sense to me now with what I did for my horse. I now need to do for me
Right.
because everything I did was for him or for Jasmine. And this was part of where I was because I was still self-abandoning. I
Okay.
still didn't understand what I needed to give for me.
Right.
So we get to when it was just my 30th birthday, and I haven't explained this, so I won't because we could be here all day. But I've had a long distance relationship with my dad since I was 4 years old. He lives in Suffolk,
Right.
and it's been a really difficult relationship. It's been strained. We had times of not talking, and Jasmine, again, didn't develop a great relationship with him because of the distance, and he has his own problems. Um, but when I was 30, he was diagnosed with cancer, a life-threatening type of cancer, and it was a blood cancer. And the bit of relationship that I did have with him, he would come and visit me in Cornwall. I'd go up there, take Jasmine up there. So the relationship that I did have was to that inner child part of me was crucial. It was really important, even though there were lots of things that I didn't get from him. He was not there for many, many times, but there was there was that bit. And so when that happened, I was just devastated. And so he's survived.
Wow.
He's still alive. Our relationship is really not in a wonderful place still, but that's how it is. And I'm glad that he survived. But that was a crucial point for me developing further symptoms because it just that that one bit of security that I had was then gone. And he hasn't been to Cornwall to visit either of us since then. He hasn't been well enough. So he
Okay.
has to have blood transfusions. Um, and so the whole time he was going through the treatment, I took Jasmine up there a lot to see him. I tried to support him. Again, I
Mhm.
had no emotional support. I didn't think that I needed any. I was just coping and fighting and trying to be there for him.
Surviving.
But I was terrified. I was just terrified. And it was because all of the rest of the problems of the relationship, anyway. So from that point, from 30, I started getting back pain.
Okay.
So when I was doing something with the horses, I'd get back spasms, quite severe, all over. I then started to see a chiropractor, and these would last for a few weeks. And at the time, I had no idea there was a connection. I didn't see it, didn't understand that.
It's not
Because
apparent.
no, and even though I'd learned to do massage, I'd learned about the pathologies of the back and about knots and tightness, and that I think,
Hmm.
you know, you learn a lot about slip discs and all these things, but I didn't understand the mind body, sorry, it's my cat, the mind body connection. I'd heard of it, but that I was thinking much more physically. So I was like, oh, I've done something to my back. So this continued. And by the time I was 35, I was having these regular bouts of quite severe back pain, but I was getting over them.
Hmm.
And then it was just after my daughter's 16th birthday. She'd got a new horse. She was quite difficult. We took her on. She was, as we were natural horsemanship, we sort of would help rehabilitate some
Right.
horses. Anyway, she had a lot of problems. She was 8 years old and she'd been to 8 homes, which
Fine.
already, you can understand there's a lot. Anyway, Jasmine had an accident on her within the first few weeks. And she had head injuries, which was a severe concussion. So she was knocked out at the time of the accident. And I mean, when she first went into hospital, she was unconscious. And she was unconscious for 12 hours, and this was completely unconscious. So I think they call it about a 2 when they on their
Wow.
scale of non-responsiveness. I didn't know if she was going to be okay. The doctors didn't know if she was going to be okay. So she had to have a CT scan. And that was quite honestly the worst, most terrifying moment of my life. And the scan came back that she had nothing serious. There was no brain bleed, but she did have swelling on the outside of the brain, which was a true concussion.
Hmm.
So they said, we don't know exactly how she'll recover. They can have some, like
Right.
personality changes and like anger problems, various things can happen. But what happened to Jasmine is that she started having seizures, and she would have several a day sometimes. So we were in and out of hospital. She'd be in there for a day to a week. Sometimes she'd have many seizures a day, and getting lots of tests, everything was coming back that there's nothing wrong with her. She had an MRI, she had ECG, EEG, and there was nothing showing. So they would call them non-epileptic seizures, but
Yeah.
they were terrifying, and they would last for a long time. So she would be in them for a very long time, which is not normal epilepsy. They're quite short. On one of them, she stopped breathing, and I had to resuscitate her, which again was
Wow.
and
That's,
and at that time, so my life was just with her all the time. Sometimes she'd get up from one and then she'd fall down again, so I couldn't leave her for a second. My system was
wow.
just, as you can imagine, it was just,
Yeah.
I even had to like sleeping with me. I just because she would wake up and then she'd fall down, and so it was just hell. It was really was hell.
Yeah, I bet.
Um, Especially when that one happened where she stopped breathing, because they kept saying to me these are safe seizures, but then I was like, well, that's not safe because I had to resuscitate her. So how is this safe?
Right.
But they explained that her brain is just shutting down. It can go without breathing for several minutes, and then it's like an apnea, and then they can suddenly breathe again. But for me, and she's going blue, it was just, when
Terrifying.
when I look back now, my nervous system was just, it just, I can't even, it was awful. It was just terrifying. And she eventually just stopped. They just stopped.
Grew out of it, whatever,
She
healed.
just, yeah, she just stopped having them. I think she actually was quite, because she seems to be very intuitive. And
Mhm.
with this whole mind body thing that I've had, she's actually been the one that's said to me, first of all, you can get better. And, she's kind of known all of the things before I've learned them. And she was able to talk to herself and really take charge and control of herself when these were happening, because she would feel the weakness, and then she would be able to say like, no, stop it, I'm holding on, you're not doing this. So she it wasn't just that they just stopped. I think she was very, very strong and knew what to do. And then we found a doctor of psychiatry privately, um, who was amazing, and he supported her through the rest of the healing time. So we then go fast forward a few months, and we moved house. My horse, my special horse, then had colic. We had a couple of nights with him in the cold in January, and he died. And so when that happened, you know, Jasmine had just started getting better. That happened, and I was destroyed. I actually I felt like I was half dead, or even more than half dead, because part of me just wanted to go with him. The other part was like, this is not fair. Like, I've had this with, like, being threatened to lose Jasmine for all this time, and now he's been taken from me. So I'm quite a spiritual person, and I was like, God, how dare you do this to me? How dare you do this to me? It's just, I was so angry. But also, what happened was that when he died, I kind of froze, and I didn't feel the emotion. I just shut down completely. I had no control over it. And it was the first experience that I could remember that I was like, I'm like, I'm like somewhere else. It's like a complete disassociation where I was disconnected completely from myself, from feeling anything, and I couldn't get it back, and I wasn't feeling. And I then experienced very severe gastrointestinal issues, such severe pain that I had to be taken to the emergency, to the ER, I think you call it, because the pain was so severe. I thought something
Right.
terrible was happening. And I was checked over. They're like, this is fine. This is like just IBS. So this amount of pain, because when I'd had IBS before, it was not that severe pain.
Right.
This was really severe. And this then turned into not being able to eat. So I ended up being able to eat rice, coconut milk, and bananas for about 3 months. Couldn't, and nothing else. I just get this really severe pain. I had to be checked out a few more times because they obviously need to check in case you have appendicitis. And that's one of the things I think with these symptoms is key. When you don't know, you do have to go to the doctor and get checked out.
Yeah.
You have to.
Rule out anything serious. Correct.
Yeah, to rule out anything serious. And so there was no infection, there was nothing serious, but I still couldn't eat. The doctor put me on what they call a low FODMAPs diet,
Mhm.
which is, you can't eat all sorts of things, vegetables and well, just all sorts. I then went to see a naturopathic doctor. He gave me some herbs. He got me eating a few more things, but there were still all these things I couldn't eat. So lots of things were eliminated. I was getting a lot of stomach pain, a lot of issues, and it was that's when the symptoms turned chronic because they were debilitating, and my mind was on them all the time. That's where this is where the change happened, is where I'd gone from, having it, getting over it and getting on with life, to now I couldn't get on with life. This was all
Debilitating.
consuming, debilitating, all consuming. And
Mhm.
and I think the thing as well that I understand the people that have issues with the food is it's actually subconsciously, I think it does make you quite angry, that you can't eat. This
Right.
is just another additional thing, isn't it? Other people are eating and you've got to go and be like, oh, I can't have that and I can't have that. And it's just thinking about what you're going to eat all the time. So it just becomes a whole thing.
Mhm.
So then the next thing that happened was this horse that Jasmine had the accident on. We still have had her then. I still have her now. Is because I was so shut down and in this state that I wasn't able to be what I needed to be around the horses. She spooked one day and knocked me over. And this is it, we never had any accidents with horses up until this point.
Right.
I'd always been really careful with them, and I just wasn't aware that day. So I actually had a hematoma in my calf from that accident, and I had a mild concussion. So I had a little bit of
Right.
genuine injury. I had to get that checked out, the calf checked out. And from that point, I then became terrified of being around the horses.
Oh,
And I couldn't control it. This is not like you feel a bit of anxiety or all that happened. I actually was it was PTSD, So whenever I would go near the horses after this accident, I was shaking. I'd got blurred vision. I felt like I was going to pass out. And I was just like, what am I going to do now? Because I've got these four horses still, a couple of rescues. Like, how am I going to look after them? And I couldn't go near her. This particular horse, I was so scared of her, but I knew that was going to, and I felt terrible. So I was like, because,
Right.
you know, I sort of have big feelings and care about the horses. So this was the whole thing was just going round and round, and I was beating myself up about it, but I couldn't do anything about it. And then my back started to go. So, and what was really interesting was the stomach symptoms started easing up, back pain started, back to the chiropractor, then added in an osteopath and a physio. And it was gradual. So there was nothing happened. So that accident had happened a few months before. So it wasn't that.
Yeah.
And they're saying to me, oh, I think it's your disc. So eventually I was told it was a slip disc. The pain was getting really severe. So I couldn't turn, I couldn't move, I couldn't bend. Did go to the doctors because it was getting so bad. And the doctor said, don't really know what you've done. Could send you for an MRI. But he said, to be honest, there's probably no point because most back surgeries aren't very successful anyway. So I was actually really lucky. I was like, now,
Sure,
now when
but
I
at the
look back,
same time, there's no hope.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing he said, which was really interesting, which I think was quite lucky, is he told me to keep moving. He's like, keep moving. He was quite a clued up doctor. He's like, you need to keep bending, need to keep moving. And he said, do some yoga or Pilates. So that's what I did. I did Pilates and I got a bit straighter, still in tons of pain. And I started yoga, which I still do. And I actually, because I'd always wanted to do yoga and I actually love yoga. So that was, yeah, wonderful. But when I was first going to yoga, I was in so much pain. I walked in the door and I was kind of like all hunched round, shut down. My back was rounded. I wasn't as twisted as before because I'd been doing the Pilates, but I was in terrible pain. And I looked at everyone and they're like lying flat on the floor, and I couldn't do that because some people with back pain, the being flat on the floor, that helps. I couldn't go flat on the floor because my back was like in
Right.
a weird shape. It was just so much tension in it. And the thing about it is it was the thoracic spine that was hurting really intensely initially. And I won't go into all the graphic details, but yes, there was the nerve pain and the shooting down the arms, and then it starts going into the neck. And none of it makes sense to the chiropractors or osteopaths because the nerve involvement was going all over the place.
It didn't map. Right.
It didn't map and it spread. And then it went into my lower back and then it was affecting my legs. So it's like sciatica as well. So it was just my whole body. And I was going around saying to people, I feel like I'm 90. I really did. I could hardly move. And even trying to pick up the kettle it was agony.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just absolute agony. And I mean, the state I was in, and I think this is the thing as well, is that with feeling like that with the horses, I felt really vulnerable as well. So, any little knock or you just feel so
It's so
vulnerable,
guarded.
so guarded, so vulnerable. And and I was then starting to feel kind of hopeless and like, if this is my life, I don't want to be here. And I was like, I've got to be here for Jasmine, but I was like, how can I, how am I any good to her when I can't do anything? I can't work. I can't look after the horses properly. I can't even make a cup of tea. Um, this is, and I was absolutely miserable
Yeah.
and it was all consuming. So that's the thing when it's just, your mind is just on it all the time. So the stomach stuff had eased up, the back stuff had my attention all day long. I had no relief from it. And the other thing was, I did go to the doctors about pain relief, and they said, nope, you can't have any because of your stomach. So, so what I did do was use the hot water bottle, and I used the hot water bottle so much, it just like that was going everywhere with me. And I noticed in the mirror one day I had all these funny marks on my back, and I didn't clock what it was, but I was like, oh, that's really weird. What on earth is going on there? So I went back to the doctor and he sat there in the chair laughing at me and he said, have you been using a hot water bottle? I was like, yeah. So I'd actually got, kind of purple lines. I can't remember what they call it because I'd used the hot water bottle so much, it had marked my skin.
Wow.
And he was just sat there laughing, which was not really helpful, but at least I knew because I thought something terrible was going on because it would look quite bruised and awful. So I stopped using that, but that was all I had. That was the only kind of relief I could
Right.
find was to have that all the time. Anyway, so I was, attempting yoga. I was trying to get myself moving again.
Sure.
And it was Jasmine's doctor, the psychiatrist, that actually said, he told Jasmine, he said about Dr. Sano. And he said, because she was like, mum's in a terrible state and there's obviously no support for her. Um, and she said to me one day after she'd spoken to him, Ben says this, he says, the reason you've got so much back pain is because you've got all this internalized emotions and trauma that you haven't dealt with and it's gone into your body. And I was like, what? That's not true. I
Right.
said, I've got a bad back. I said, I've actually got, problem, like the discs are all, like the stuff you could come up with, it's incredible what your brain can create in what's actually physically happening. So I was like, no, 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 no. Then I thought about it. I looked into it. I found curable, started looking, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's starting to make sense. I found Nicole Sachs. I started doing the journal speak. So I did that for, I don't know, 6 months, and the pain started to lessen.
Okay. Wonderful.
Continued with yoga, got more move, it was like learning to move my whole body again. Um, Continued with the journal speak. I also started seeing a psychologist, so I was having psychotherapy. After the first session, I fainted.
Wow.
Um,
After therapy,
yeah,
psychotherapy.
after the first psychotherapy session, and I had to again got it checked out. The doctor wanted to do heart tests and all kinds of things, which was overkill, but I was fine, and I knew that there was nothing else going on. But I think this is the thing, and I think this it's very difficult to get things checked out. But when you do, you have the clarity that you can go forward with this work
Hmm.
without any doubt. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll just say sort of as things developed and I learned that I don't need to get things checked out because I can check, is this behaving like TMS? But at that time, I didn't know. And so anyway, my heart was fine. Everything else was fine. I didn't have anything weird going on. I fainted because I was overwhelmed. And that was how much my subconscious did not want me to talk about feelings or anything else. Um, so it was really difficult. And the psychotherapist said my nervous system had gone into what they call the flop. So it was just completely shut down. It was in freeze. Um,
Freeze and flop. Actually, I've
yeah,
never heard the term flop. I
I
heard
haven't, but that's what she called it. She called it flop. Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, fawn,
Fawn. Yeah.
and now flop. I never heard
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's what she said they call it in psychologist terms is the flop. So I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, but it's in a kind of it's within the freeze state. I guess perhaps to do with the fainting. So um I just was very careful with myself. So then after the therapy sessions, I would, give myself time afterwards. I would sit down.
Mhm.
Um, I'd know that I was going to be feeling overwhelmed, and I did get quite a lot of varying symptoms that would come up. And a new symptom that developed was allergies. So very, really, really severe pollen allergies. And that's one of the ones I think I talked to you about on one of the coaching calls one time, where I did end up taking medication for antihistamines and steroids because it was so severe. The allergies became really severe. I was just streaming all the time. And and I just sinus pain, all kinds of things with it, and ear pain. Um, and so that then became really debilitating. So the back pain was easing, the stomach stuff was easing, then the
The thing. Yeah.
allergies became the thing. But what was incredible was that when I talked to you about it, and you said how to think about taking the medication, that I'm just taking this just to help you feel safer, not to fix the symptom. And within a week, it was like the symptoms were going, and I dropped the medication. But anyway, so I'll just go back a little bit. So I'd started the psychotherapy, I did the journaling, um, some emotions, real emotions from my past. Again, I won't go into it all, but they came up, and at that time, I was still having some of the back pain. The emotion came up, and when it came up, it was so intense that I actually I thought, oh my God, I quite understand why you don't want to feel this. Didn't know. I was just like, I don't know how I can bear feeling this. But all the tension went out of my body when I felt that. I cried and I cried, not in a panic attack way, but I just cried and it felt the emotion. But what I was feeling was this such deep insecurity, and it was just so, I just felt so unsafe, so insecure. It was just pure terror. And I was like, I just don't know how to, I didn't know how to handle it. And I was, at the time, I was just like, I, almost rather the back pain or the
Yeah.
other symptoms than feel like this. And I was just, and I prayed. I was like, I just like, how can I, what can I do with this? This is awful. Like, help me, please find a way out of this. And that's when I then found your work.
Okay.
I was like, you're talking about safety. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, how do I feel safe? How do I help myself feel safe?
Right.
So I then found you, and that was it. So I then watched all your videos. It didn't take me long to decide that I was going to jump onto the group coaching. I was like, yeah, that definitely, I'm going to give that to myself. I'm going to have that extra support, and that was the best decision I made.
Love it.
Because from that point, and I honestly, Dan, didn't understand how to process emotions before that point.
Right.
And although I was having psychotherapy and I continued, it was your work that helped me understand how to feel emotions. It's like, it's so simple. It's so simple. But no one ever told me that's what you do. And no one ever told me that you don't have to hang on to, you don't have to be in them for days, because with the PTSD stuff that I think was happening to me for a long time, happened with the horses, but I think that's what was happening with emotions sometimes, is that I'd see them, stuff come from my past, and I go, oh, running away from that because of the story.
Hmm.
And that's what you teach, because you keep going with the story, and that's what keeps them running.
Yeah.
That
So
doesn't need to
I
happen.
want to jump in here. You said it's so simple as to how to deal with emotions. I'm sure a lot of people watching are saying, okay, well, tell us, what do we do? So, what was your interpretation of how to better feel emotions? I know how I teach it, but the people watching are, looking to learn from you. And you said, "Oh, I never knew how to do it, and it was so
And
simple." So, what was that experience, and how did you interpret the path
so
of feeling it?
what you would say, just let them come up as they are, your right now emotions.
Hmm.
So it's not digging, it's whatever comes up right now, just allow it. Just allow it. Don't be scared of it. Just allow it to come, feel it. Whatever, there's a story running. There's going to be a story running. So you let that story run. Like, they can come through. You can name them if you want. It's grief, whatever. But I'm just feeling it. And then it's like, when I stop allowing that story of what happened to keep running, that's the key. Is to not stay with that, is to just it's like a pure emotion. It comes up, it comes through you, and then we move on to the next moment.
Let the story go.
Let the
Correct.
story go. Yeah. And that's what I didn't understand to do before. It was just overwhelming. I think that's the thing because there would be all of that story with it and all of the chatter in the mind about all of the terrible things. So and there's so many keys of things that you would say also about the symptoms that also tie into that. I think one of the things you say about the stories and, perhaps, that you've got symptoms and you've got back pain and you run this story called My Horrible Life. I
Hmm.
was absolutely doing that, like,
Most people do.
absolutely like I'm a victim now. This is awful. This is the most, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I want to die. What kind of horrible day am I gonna have today? How am I gonna manage anything? I've got all of this. And I think this is the other thing, and I know on the group we don't kind of talk about this, but I'll just say it now because it's one of the things that definitely people feel, and I know I felt, is that when these symptoms turn chronic, it
Mhm.
feels like somebody else has taken over and you're at war with yourself.
Okay. I agree.
Okay, yeah, you
See that?
feel like suddenly you don't have any control of your body. You kind of don't have any control of your mind because your mind is focused on your symptoms. And it's like a war because you're like, I want to get out of here. I don't want to be in here with you. I don't want to be in this body. I don't want to be feeling all of this pain. I don't want to be feeling all those horrible emotions either. And I don't want all of this negative thought process because it's like a bully in there. It's really when you start paying attention and all those years that up until this point, and I didn't understand that I've got all these different parts inside my head that are all, you know, talking to each other, and you've got this chatter going on that's rubbish.
A lot of times, yeah.
Yeah, this voice in there that is, and I think that's the other thing that you say as well is that you ended up this way, but it's not your fault. And I think
Yes.
that for me, oh, because I felt like everything was my fault. I never knew it wasn't my fault. And I didn't really understand that, all of the negative talk, all of the criticism, all the perfectionism, that wasn't hadn't come from me. I'd learned that.
Yeah.
Learned it from parents,
Survival
learned it from
strategy to survive.
society. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
survival. And all of these critical voices in there that they're you know, you don't have to listen to them. And that was, I think, from the recovery for me, that was the biggest thing. And actually the most difficult thing was that voice in there that was always like, um, putting me down, or keeping me focused on the symptoms, trying to be really graphic about them.
Mhm.
So when I was getting better from the back pain, it was almost like sort of a suction or an obsession. So once I started focusing on other things, it would go come back, back onto the pain. And it was a constant, it felt like a constant battle.
Sure.
And like I said, this kind of, where you feel like you're at war with yourself. And when I was going to the yoga classes, one of the key moments I had was actually at the end of yoga in Shavasana. You're lying down. I had a lot of pillows and blankets because my yoga teacher was saying I was a bit like a princess or princess in the pea. Everything was, I could feel everything. And I was lying there and she said, and I was in pain, and she said, just surrender your body to the floor. Just surrender, just let it just melt. If there's a mutiny going on inside your body or your mind, just surrender that. And that was the first moment I was like, oh God, yeah, I'm actually at war with, I'm fighting, I'm just constantly fighting myself. And that word, so I was like, oh, sorry. And when I kind of focus in, that's one of the moments I had where the pain was just lessening, the tension in my body was lessening. So now that word for me is that surrender is such a beautiful word. Oh, I love that. So
Right.
with all kinds of things, I just think just surrender wherever, whatever symptom or pain or um, negative or automatic thought is going on, it's just surrender to that moment and stop fighting it.
Yeah. I
Because
talk a lot about it accepting, which is
yeah,
similar, but
yeah, accepting,
mm,
softening. And that's the other thing. That's one of the things I say to myself often is with thoughts as well is just soften. Just soften. Stop fighting. Don't run. Don't fight. Just be right there with it. It's like accept the symptom. Um, so I made a lot of progress during those times, and like I said, it was the mind work that it it's. I think it's when you and with the PTSD stuff as well, is that you just start realizing that fear is running everything.
mhm,
That's what it is all about. Like every single thing comes down to fear,
right.
all the symptoms. And, when I was on your coaching program, the back pain had just about gone and I was carrying heavy things, pushing wheelbarrows, conquered the chairs because there was the whole chair thing as well, which I think the back
Sitting pain.
pain
Yeah.
people, that, you get a whole fear of hard chairs and chairs without support. So all of that, I did do a bit of somatic tracking that I found kind of helpful with that. That did sort of work for me. And the allergies again, that was all all of the talking to my own brain,
Hmm.
just knowing what was going on, explaining to myself that, I know why you're doing this. I know why you're doing these symptoms. They are the symptom imperative. I know I had the bad stomach stuff and the back pain, but I was when things were moving, I understood. I'd read Sarno's books as well, and so I understood what was happening, but it still wasn't easy. I
No,
think that's the
no,
thing. It's like when things, because you do just want to get better. You just like, when is this going to end? Can we just get better quickly? It's like your video that you put out today was about that, wasn't it? Is about the,
sure.
not putting, a timeline on it. And because it's, again, it's on safety to the nervous system. And that's something with natural horsemanship. Again, it's like the horses set the timelines, so you're not in charge of that. You're not in charge of your subconscious. And what I was learning then at this point is that I needed to get my subconscious to trust me, because that's what was going on. Is that there's a breakdown in trust. The reason you've got the symptoms is because your subconscious has decided to take over to protect you from things that it thinks are dangerous.
Right. Exactly.
And whatever things have happened in life, whatever traumas have happened, because to the subconscious, they're still there. And it then is protecting you from life. But what happens is everything becomes dangerous. And I think this is, even though I was convincing it that it didn't need to do the back pain, it was still like, life is dangerous.
Yeah. Still up here.
Yeah, it's still like, don't go out, don't go and do these things. So that's the allergies and the feeling faint. That was something that I was really struggling with, although I was trying to keep going with life, keep implementing all of the work. Obviously, like I'm like, I've got a strong body. There's nothing wrong with my back. I've got, if some stomach's fine, I can eat what I like, all of these things. But it was still, my nervous system was still not feeling
Trusting.
safe.
Wasn't
Yeah,
trusting that.
wasn't trusting. So I was at the time going to one choir, and I talked to you about I would go to choir and I was feeling like I was going to pass out. So this was the symptom that was going on. I was feeling shaky, dizzy.
Were you the
It
one
was,
who I kind of advised, well, get there and sit in a chair on the stage?
yeah. Well, you told me to wear a crash helmet, I think as well. Yeah.
That sounds so insensitive when you say it that way. But
You're
for
like, don't
everybody
worry about it.
watching,
Just put a crash helmet on.
for everybody watching, the coaching, yes, it's serious business. We're trying to heal.
Yeah.
Um, but we have some fun with it because, if we can smile and laugh while we're going through this journey,
Mm.
it's going to make it easier. So I didn't remember telling you to get a crash helmet, but I wish I had a picture of that. You on the choir with the crash helmet.
I know. Because I was getting this at yoga as well. I was feeling like I was going to pass out in yoga as well. And I think you said don't worry about that because you probably aren't going to be on the floor anyway. And because a lot of the things you are, I think that's when I was feeling in the end bit Shavasana, where it's the relaxing bit, is when I was having like sort of a major panic attack. Um, and I think also I didn't want people to know because this is the thing as
Mhm.
well, is that you feel
Of
really
course.
vulnerable, and I was a person that actually I didn't really like talking about my symptoms anyway. So I think that's
Good.
one of the things that has really helped. Um, is that lots of people that know me wouldn't even know this was all going on.
Right.
They would have known a bit about the back pain, but because I then never talked about it again. So I think this is a thing. Yeah, most people will be surprised because they didn't know. And I think that was partly because I don't like sharing a lot about myself, just the way I am, but I know it's one of the keys. Um, and it's the same as the groaning when you're in pain is, like, oh, he's like,
Yeah,
not doing that is,
I
is
think
trying
I
not to do
called
these
that.
things.
I think I called that. Do you make sound effects when you're moving? The and
Yeah,
people, so many people were like, "Oh my goodness, I do that. I make the
yeah,
moans, the groans, the
yeah,
ugh, ouch."
I know. Yeah. Yeah, like I said earlier, I was like a 90-year-old. I was like, oh, and I realized I was like, I've got to stop this. But your strategy was I'm good, wasn't it? You kind of sit there and you're like, I'm good.
And then do it and then move.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Love it.
Which is a brilliant one. And well, anyway, so with the dizziness, I was there and it was making me feel panicky. I wanted to run out of the choir, and that was the whole thing. It was a panic attack. Um, but I was like, oh God, what if I pass out? And I think you said to me, so what? If you pass out, so what? You're going to be fine. You see, if you're sitting on the chair, you're going to be fine. If you're laying down, you're fine. And so what? If other people, it doesn't matter what they think.
They'll help
And
you. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter. And I think so that for me, I was like, okay, it really doesn't matter. And so I think someone on the group recommended Dare. So I did get the Dare app and then used the meditations, which I found wonderful. Love listening to Barry's Irish
Yeah.
accent,
A
going to
great
sleep.
voice.
Just yeah. So they were really helpful. And again, but it's just saying the same thing that you say is it's not running away. It's like I think he talks about having this anxiety monster, but that could be with the symptom as well, and just making it funny. So
Mhm.
it's, trying to put the humor in, put the curiosity in. So when something's happening, you're just like, oh, yeah, okay, I see you. You're not scaring me. And I'm going to do it anyway. And it's like, you're feeling the anxiety, and with there, it's run towards, isn't it? So rather than running away from
Right.
that anxiety, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel the symptom. It's like, no, I'm gonna face this.
Right.
And I think that's one of the other things is I got to that point where I was like almost hunting the symptoms. I was like, okay, if I do this, it's going to trigger it, so I'm going to look for triggers.
Okay. And trigger on purpose so you can
Yeah,
overcome it.
yeah.
Okay.
So that was one of the things that I started to do after a while. When I became braver, I'd be like, you know, not to the point where it was a balance. So not where I'd completely freak myself out. And the thing is, I'd have to be in a good place to do that.
Yeah.
I
So
think that's the thing.
interesting. A lot of people will list their triggers as a list of things to avoid.
Yeah.
My suggestion recently, I forget the title of the video, but I did a video recently that um, if you list your triggers, that is a list of things to overcome and
Yeah.
teach.
Yep.
not avoid, because
Yep.
avoidance says those things are the danger, can't do
Yep.
them.
Yep.
List the triggers as a way to say, those are the things I have to teach my brain are okay.
Yep.
That's a safe way or an appropriate way of saying these things are the triggers. I'm going to overcome them. So
Yep.
that was just a thought.
Yeah. Because there were lots of things. I mean, one of the things with the back pain and shoulder pain, that was the shoulder was actually a little bit more difficult to shift because the symptoms weren't moving in that. And when you're looking for, is this TMS, you're looking for an inconsistency. And when it was hanging on in my shoulder, it was hard to find an inconsistency, but I did eventually.
Yeah.
It did change. Like the time of day, the pain changed a little bit, and I was like, okay, I've got you there.
Right.
But even doing something like I realized I was avoiding doing the recycling because it was a trigger. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, what? And this is ridiculous that when I start doing the recycling, because there's no physical reason for this, I start doing the recycling, my shoulder and back are playing up. So why is that? And I was like, I hate doing it. It's really boring. And that's it. That's all there is to it. And it's like just a learned thing. It was like cleaning the cupboards out. And then I was like, I'm doing all this yoga. So why is cleaning the cupboard out causing me to have twinges? So it was all these things over time that I identified that I was avoiding that I was then like, right, okay, we're gonna,
You do it.
have a look at this and I'm willing to have the symptom flare.
That's key. You got to be willing to experience a symptom
Yeah.
in order to overcome it. Because if you avoid the symptom at all costs,
Yep.
your brain will continue to see that thing you're avoiding as the problem. If you're
Yeah.
willing to experience a symptom, then you can actually learn from it and teach your brain something new, which is, oh, the cupboards aren't the problem.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
so obviously you were in the group for a while. You finally made a move
Mm.
out. What would you say your recovery was like at the time you left the group and then where you are now? And I
Okay.
think you also mentioned your daughter had some issues with a root canal and some dental pain
Mhm.
afterwards. And if you can kind of bring it to a close, that would be great on
Yep.
where you were when you left the group. Obviously, continuing to have the right mindset and see
Mhm.
things accurately. But give me a kind of a wrap up
Okay.
as to where we're
So
at.
I was doing fabulously in the group. All the symptoms were, I was getting on top of them, getting on top of my mind. I had what did happen not long before I left. Well, actually, probably a few months is that my sister was actually then diagnosed with cancer. And I was in a really good place. That happened, and I was like, oh my God, this is like another major traumatic
Yeah.
thing. But you coached me through that. And I'll just go into this, because this was the last symptom. This was the last symptom to go. Is that I didn't know what was going to happen to her before she um, had this, but what I started happening to me is that I then eating, although not digestive, but I actually couldn't swallow. So this was something
Oh,
that yeah. So I couldn't swallow. I started I'd try and eat and I'd gag, I'd choke. Um, and I didn't know that my sister was going to, at that point, be on a feeding tube, but that's what happened to her. And so I understand now that it was almost like a kind of empathic type of symptom. So when she got to that point, had already experienced this, so I could actually help her through it. And I know your mum had had a stroke at that time, and you know that was one of the symptoms she had. And you, like, I spoke to you about that, and you said to me, just like let yourself have ice cream, or just don't, it's like don't make a big deal out of it. Um, so I went quiet on the coaching then because things became very intense with my sister, and I actually didn't want to talk about it or trigger other people.
understandable.
So, but I'd still come on, I'd still listen. And I knew what was going. I think this is the thing. I knew what was going on with this symptom. I had no doubt. I was 100%
Wow.
TMS, mind body,
Mhm.
and I also then realized that it was a completely empathic kind of symptom for my sister, but it was still difficult, and my brain was still being terrified of food. So I was actually experiencing a panic attack before I was eating.
Wow.
I would shake, I would sweat, mouth would go dry, couldn't eat, couldn't, and so then kind of I couldn't eat out because of the gagging, and it was awful. Um, so that was actually really challenging to deal with, and also the migraines then came back, but not with the migraine, not just with the head, because I that had all gone. I was like, I could talk myself out of a migraine within minutes, but I started vomiting. And
Oh,
this was on the days that she was having chemo and radiotherapy.
empathic.
Yeah. So the
Wow.
days she was having treatment, I would be purging and throwing up with the headache as well, and floored completely, like just hanging onto the edge of a sofa with the bucket. But I knew what was going on. This is the thing. I didn't go to the doctors.
Doesn't make it any more fun.
No. And I knew the day I was like, oh, okay, I can't, my body, my mind can't deal with the emotions of what she's going through. And sisters are connected, and we
Right.
said empathic. Um, so that's what was happening. So that was still going on when I decided to leave the group. But I think I'd got to the point where I knew what to do.
Right.
This is the thing. I knew how to talk myself through it. And my sister's, she got through the treatment, she survived. We didn't know how it was going to go, but this work helped her. Your coaching helped me help her, because you said to me as well, I think you said it's going to be like watching a train wreck because you're witnessing what she's going through. I wanted to run away from it emotionally. That was my natural thing. I did not want to see the horrors of what would have to happen.
Right.
But I was able to support her. She lives away from me, but we were on the phone all the time, messaging all the time. And I was able to stay positive for her as well. I think which that all this work it helped her. She didn't ask for a prognosis, which I think again is part of having that really positive mindset. She didn't want to be told that. She didn't want to be told what they think. She was just stayed focused and stayed positive. And I stayed with her. Although I was experiencing all those symptoms, and the swallowing decided to hang around for a while after she'd recovered. So I
Okay.
still had a thing of going eating out where it was a bit of a thing. But I just kept working at it. I just kept giving myself grace, and would just keep trying little bits. So I'd go and I'd just like have ice cream with people. I'd just have drinks, and eventually got back to the point where I can go out to dinner with people again now.
Awesome. So
So
cool.
like I said, now no chronic symptoms at
That's
all.
that's
A bit,
fantastic. And
a bit of
symptom
a
free for
headache,
about how long?
about 6 months.
That's awesome. And even if you get a little,
I get a little bit of a
like,
headache.
yeah,
Yeah,
and but I know what that is. I'm not concerned, and it
exactly. Yeah.
tends to go away pretty quickly.
And I haven't had back pain for quite a few years now.
Love that.
So that was before I'd started your course. Yeah, the back pain was already under wraps, and that hasn't come back.
Yeah, you know your
Nor
body.
have the allergies, nor have the allergies. So that's um
Well, you've
yeah.
had like this is a pretty long list of symptoms.
I
There's a
know.
lot. I've been writing a lot. I need to get
I
names.
know. I know.
Um, but all of that is just evidence as to um, how much somatic symptoms can manifest and show up in different ways,
Yeah.
uh, but also the power of teaching the brain that you're okay, that I'm
Yeah.
safe, I'm not in danger. And it
Yeah.
was your clarity through this whole journey, especially towards the end as you really got into this work, um, that allowed your brain to finally accept, like, wow, we really are okay,
Yeah.
emotionally, physically, mentally.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
Yeah. It's
Any any last recommendations for anybody watching?
um I did write some down earlier, but I think I've probably said a lot of them. Oh, and with Jasmine as well. She joined your group when she'd had a root canal and she developed a lot of pain, and I was like, Not quite sure about this. I don't know about it. And you helped her immediately. And you said the local anesthetic wears off, within a couple of hours because she wasn't sure if it was that. And the dentist was saying, well, sometimes this can, cause problems. So she had a lot of face pain, neuralgia, whatever you want to call it. But she did some of your coaching. She stayed on the course for a while and she cleared it. She went in and had more dental work done and she's
No,
fine.
no further problems.
No further problems. So, any other recommendations are, I think, is that I would recommend you absolutely
I
to
wasn't
anyone that's
fishing
going
for
through
that,
this,
but thank
but
you.
absolutely. And it does work. This is true. This is truth. And I think, I have found it really hard to trust people
Mhm.
throughout my life. It's very difficult to find things and people I trust, but I do trust you completely. Have complete faith in your work and everything you do. And the daily videos that you put out are just it's just having that consistency. You show up every day for everybody. And if people can't afford to do have coaching sessions, your videos, you put them out there every single day that are free for anybody to listen to. And I don't listen to them every day now because I don't need to, but I did.
Wonderful. And I'm
Um,
thrilled for that. That's awesome. I want that for
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. And I think that's the thing is you have to stay committed and this is an opportunity to be there for yourself, to learn how to show up for yourself, how to be a better person, because so many of us don't understand. We are all running around in fight or flight. We're dysregulated. We have all these things going on. We don't know how to be there. And I think it's just after going through this, life is beautiful. It's just so peaceful. And
Hmm.
when I wake up in the morning now, I don't have the horror movie. I actually wake up and I say really nice things to myself. I just say, you're going to have a beautiful day. No matter what happens today, you're going to see the beauty in it.
I love
I
that.
say to myself, I'm here for you. I love you. And I think that's one of the things my psychotherapist said to me, which was the key actually, is she said, who's always been there in your life? Like who is the person that's always been there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you.
I have. And even though I was running away and abandoning myself, I was always the person that was there, and I still am. So when you're in your deepest, darkest moment in the pit of despair and giving up, wanting to get out of your body, wanting to leave, is that you're there in there, and you've got somebody in there that cares for you and loves you
Yeah.
because you do. There is somebody in there that does. You might have parts of you that are beating you up and saying terrible things, but there is a way out of this in
Hmm.
it. And I promise anybody that follows Dan and the other wonderful people out there to do this work, you will absolutely recover. And you will absolutely recover 100% from TMS, mind body symptoms. And I mean, my belief also is that we absolutely have the ability to recover from all symptoms.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
like
and
this
we're seeing that.
Gabor Mate talks about this. If people have read his book, Joe Dispenza, there's so many people out there that people from any kind of illness, disease, we can recover.
Yeah, and we're seeing that also, even in my community. We just did a
Mm.
success story for Angie a few days ago.
Yeah,
Just did a
watch that.
success story this morning, a lady by the name of Vanessa. Uh, Wild, crazy level of symptoms to the
Mm,
point of shutdown of much of functions in the body. You
mm,
experienced a good bit of that.
mm,
Um, and with the brain that's taught that you're actually okay, it starts to run the machinery of the human body efficiently, effectively, and without the fear and the terror and the um, just the panic.
mm,
Brain gets out of the way and allows the body to heal because this body knows what to do. So if there's any
mm.
physical element of it, the body will return to balance.
Yeah.
But we got to get the brain on board with the fact that panic, fear, terror, stories, catastrophic thinking, self-criticism, judgment, all of these negativities, that's not part of
Yeah.
the solution. And it's really
Yeah.
hard for the brain to run the equipment of the body effectively when there's so much chaos from the neck up.
Yeah.
So I love the fact you pointed out that this is not your fault. It wasn't, it never was. It's where you ended up,
Mm.
but you took responsibility for getting yourself out of it. So I honor you for that and for the work you've put in.
Thank you.
And now
Thank you.
you've come out of, I don't want to be here anymore, to life is beautiful.
Yeah. I love my life.
And
Yeah.
talk about a transformation. Like, holy
Yeah.
cow.
Yeah.
'Cause
And
had somebody said to you, you're going to think life is beautiful at some point when you were in the deep, dark despair, you would have said, you're crazy.
yeah, go away. Leave me alone. Yeah.
Exactly. So I love it. Thank you so much. Proud of you.
Thank you,
Unbelievably proud
Dan.
of you. You've done
Thank you
so
so
well.
much.
And now you are raising your daughter in such a way that she's able to help herself
Yeah.
not suffer with symptoms long term, with that
Yeah.
dental facial pain and getting her out of that. So absolutely beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Dan. And anybody listening, Dan is a safety anchor and like a human angel that's out here to help and support anyone that's going through any terrible symptoms and pains.
So
And
thank
that
you so much.
includes mental health stuff too.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dynamite. Bethany, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
If I can ever do anything for you, you know where to find me. And like
Absolutely.
I always say at the end of my videos, like usual, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. See you tomorrow,
Awesome.
Dan. Thank you.
This will probably take, give or take about a week to publish and post. So keep an eye on it
Yep.
on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you look. Feel free to jump into
Yep.
the
Will do.
comments and interact with people who are commenting on it if you'd like.
Yeah. Love
Or
to.
you can lay low and stay invisible, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
No pressure either way, but it'll probably take
Okay.
about a week. I've actually recorded 3 success stories today,
Oh,
and
wow.
and I've got like
Yeah.
5 more scheduled over the next several weeks. So
Yeah.
um, this stuff works,
Awesome.
folks.
It really does.
Bethany is proof. So thank you so much, and give
Thank
a
you,
wave
Dan.
and take care, everybody.
Bye bye.